just, overwhelmed by the beauty and the solidity and the structure of the temple. Going on, it says, "But Jesus said to them, 'As for what you see here, the time will come when not one stone will be left on another. Every one of them will be thrown to the ground.'" Jesus is saying, don't get too impressed with this building or any building. And with regard to this particular building, which you're so overwhelmed by, looks so solid, looks so pretty, a time's going to come when it will be completely destroyed. "Teacher," they asked in response, "when will these things happen? And what will be the sign that they are about to take place?" Notice here, their question is about the destruction of the temple. And what Jesus is going to say now throughout this passage is about the destruction of the temple, which happened in 70 AD. This is what's fueling this whole discussion. So Jesus responds by saying, "Well, watch out that you are not deceived. For many will come in my name claiming, 'I am he,' and 'the time is near.' Do not follow them. When you hear of wars and uprisings, don't be frightened." Listen to that. These things must happen first. They're going to happen. So don't be frightened about it. But the end will not come right away. Jesus is saying that when things start to turn south, when things start to look bad, people grow afraid. And when they grow afraid, they're susceptible to anyone who promises security. So there'll be all these false messiahs who, even in Jesus' name, will lead people astray, promise them false solutions. And we know that, as a matter of fact, before 70 AD, there's a number of Jewish Messiah-type figures that were doing this with the people and coming up with crazy schemes. We know of one account where a guy thought God told him to lead 4,000 people out in the desert, and they all died out there, and weird stuff was going on. So Jesus is warning them about these things. Out of fear, when people are afraid enough, they'll grab onto anything. Jesus says, don't be afraid. Don't follow these folks who are saying, "The end is near, follow me." Then Jesus said to them, "Nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be great earthquakes, famines, and pestilences in various places. And fearful events and great signs from heaven will happen. But before all of this, they will lay hands on you and persecute you. Then you will be delivered to synagogues and prisons, and you will be brought before kings and governors, and all on account of my name." Notice there that Jesus says, he's talking to his disciples, you're going to be delivered to synagogues. Now, that would never happen to a Gentile. Gentiles are not tried in synagogues, but Jews in the first century were. And you could be put on trial and be thrown into prison or even executed, which tells you that Jesus is talking about a specific event that's going to be happening in the near future, and his disciples are going to be witnessing this. And so he says, you will bear testimony to me, but make up your mind not to worry beforehand how you will defend yourselves. That's interesting. For I will give you words and wisdom that none of your adversaries will be able to resist or contradict. You will be betrayed even by parents, brothers, sisters, relatives, and friends, and they will put some of you to death. Everyone will hate you because of me. And in fact, this was happening prior to the destruction of the temple. When Nero blamed the fire on Rome on the Christians, everyone hated them, and they were massacred left and right. Everyone will hate you because of me. But listen to this. But not a hair of your head will perish. Stand firm, and you will win life. Do you notice what looks like a contradiction there? Okay, some of you are going to die, but not a hair in your head's going to be going to perish. Like, wow, they're going to execute us, but at least we're not going to lose our hair. Woo! Standing on the promises of God. Something's going on here, folks. Now, in this passage, it's always important in the Bible when you're reading the Bible, but especially in this passage, to put it in its historical context and understand the language in its historical, cultural context. This idiom, this phrase, not a hair on your head will be harmed or will perish, was simply a way of saying, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. And so what Jesus is saying here is this, that, they're going to turn against you and hate you and persecute you, and some of you are going to die, but you're going to be okay. And that's why he can go on to say, some of you are going to die, but if you stand firm, well, then you'll enter into life. But he said we're going to die. His response would be, I'm not talking about that kind of life. I'm talking about eternal life. You're going to be okay. And then Jesus says, when you see Jerusalem being surrounded by armies, you will know that its desolation is near. And that's exactly what happened, 70 AD. Now note, he's still talking about Jerusalem. As he is throughout this passage, he's talking about Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. Then, he goes on, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Look, he's still talking about this particular event. Let those in the city get out. Let those in the country not enter the city. For this is the time of punishment and fulfillment of all that has been written. How dreadful it will be in those days for pregnant women and nursing mothers. There will be great distress in the land and the wrath against this people. They will fall by the sword and will be taken as prisoners to all the nations. Jerusalem will be trampled on by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. It's going to be a time, he says, that it's just going to be nightmarish, and it was. So we have accounts of this from Josephus, and it was brutal what happened to the Jews when Jerusalem was destroyed and the temple was torn down and they were scattered to the other nations. It was absolutely dreadful. Jesus is saying that the Romans are going to ransack the city, the temple will be destroyed, and in some sense the Gentiles will continue to trample on it, which tells you that he does see that there's a time that's going to follow this destruction of Jerusalem. This is not the end of the world. It's going to be the end of the world as the Jews knew it, because their whole worldview was based in Jerusalem and the temple, and their whole religion revolved around that. So it's the end of the world as they knew it, but Jesus knows there's going to be this time of the Gentiles that will follow. And it's not really clear what that time of the Gentiles refers to, but most believe, and I think this is accurate, it refers to the church age, which is a time of the ingathering of the Gentiles into the household of God, which was previously reserved just for Jewish folks. Now, there's a remnant of Jewish folks that are also still a part of that, of course, but by and large, God has turned to the Gentiles. So this is the time of the Gentiles, and it's going to follow the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. And now we come to a part of this passage that leads many to think that this is about the end of the world, not just about Jerusalem. So listen to this. Jesus says, there will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. On the earth, nations will be in anguish and perplexity at the roaring and tossing of the sea. People will faint from terror, apprehensive about what is coming on the world, for the heavenly bodies will be shaken. Even the stars in the sky are going to be shaking. At that time, they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. When these things begin to take place, stand up and lift up your heads. That's a phrase of encouragement. Now, everyone else is freaking out. But when everyone else is freaking out, you, my disciples, you look up into the heavens and lift up your head. Be encouraged because your redemption is drawing near. Now, a lot of folks understandably think that Jesus is talking about the end of the world here because they ask questions like this. Well, what were the signs in the heavens that happened when Jerusalem was destroyed? The sun didn't turn dark, the moon didn't turn dark or turn to blood, or there's other verses that say that kind of thing. The stars weren't shaking. And so it seems like this must be referring to the end of the world. And what about these earthquakes and famines and pestilence? There doesn't seem a global preponderance of those in 70 AD. And so they think, and when do we see the Son of Man returning in glory in 70 AD? In the clouds. And so they think it must refer to a future date. On the other hand, you got to ask this question. Isn't it a little strange if Jesus is talking to his disciples, responding to the question about when will the temple be destroyed, over and over again talking about what that's going to look like, and all of a sudden, he jumps ahead thousands of years and is going to talk about the end of the world, and not tell them that that's what he's doing? That's a little strange. If there's another way of interpreting it, that might be the better way to go. A lot of scholars, and see, this is the kind of thing that we should think about, but we should never fight over. There's room for various opinions here. But a lot of scholars, and I'm really compelled by these arguments, they argue that Jesus here is using standard apocalyptic imagery to describe a future catastrophic event. Now, apocalyptic imagery refers to imagery that characterized apocalyptic literature, which was a type of literature that was prevalent from about 200 BC to 280. We don't have it today, but in this type of literature, they used bizarre and extravagant cosmic symbols to describe catastrophic events. But no one took them literally. Now, if you're not aware of that kind of literature, you might be inclined to take it literally, but it wasn't intended like that. It's like if somebody 2,000 years from now comes upon some literature of our day and that says, that day it was raining cats and dogs. They might think, gosh, back then they thought that it rained. Did dogs really fall from the sky and cats really fall from the sky? But we know that we don't take that literally. It's just an expression a way of saying, man, it's really pouring outside.